today I'm just going to go through the Freelance Canvas. So as a background, so I've run my own consultancy freelance business for the past 12 years. And during that time, I've mentored a lot of juniors or people that have just started out in the freelancing area. So what I've done is I've actually taken all the knowledge that I've shared with them and creating a canvas, because what you have is there's already canvases out there but they mainly help large corporate startups, or they're very much based on a particular product and how the product can develop, or they're all about sorting out the value proposition. So you've got like the value proposition canvas, the iceberg canvas, the lean business model canvas, and lots of different ones. But there isn't anything for freelancers. So what I've got is the Freelance Canvas. So it helps anybody that's starting out in freelancing, or anybody that just wants to reflect on how their current freelancing operations going and how they can do it. So if you want to play along, there is the tinyurl.com freelance canvas PDF will enable you to download this PDF. And so what I'm going to do is just go through the different areas and just around the things that you need to think about in terms of running a successful freelance operation. So to begin with, structure. So depending on what country you're in, you've got a couple of different options. So here in New Zealand, and I know the same as in the UK, you can actually either be operated as a sole trader or be under the self-employed, or you could be incorporated as a business. The key thing here is understanding what you basically the differences are within your country. So I don't know what all the differences are across the country, but basically the main difference in both the UK and New Zealand is if you're a sole trader and you're self-employed, you're responsible for your taxes. Whereas if you're a company, the company's responsible for your taxes, even though as you're most likely the only shareholder, you're then responsible. So the things that you've got to think about is with structure is basically, are you going to be self-employed or incorporated? The other thing is thinking about how you're going to present yourself as a freelance operation. Are you going to use your name? So if you're just a sole trader, you can use your name, or you can have a trading name, or you need to think about your company name. So although for most of the 12 years, it's only been myself going through Siso, I decided to go for a company straight out, just because where I live in Wellington is the centre for the New Zealand government. And so therefore, most government departments have procurement teams, and procurement teams are often a bit iffy about taking on an individual, but if they take on a company, then it's a lot easier. So I went straight for a company name, and that was my choice. Next is around business management. So how are you going to do the day-to-day running of your company? Are you going to do your own finances? Do you have the knowledge of you doing your own finances, or is there a accountancy system that makes it nice and easy for sole traders or small businesses? Or if not, are you going to hire an accountant? The next thing is really, in terms of setting up, do you need a loan to start freelancing? Do you need to buy yourself some stuff to start freelancing, or is there certain collateral that you need? Is there a vehicle that you need, or something like that? The next is how you're going to actually invoice and charge your clients, because that's the key to day-to-day running, is you've got to make sure you get paid. Next is, do you have the right bank account set up? So a lot of people make the mistake when first starting out, especially as a sole trader and not as a freelance operating company, is that they use their same personal bank accounts as for their sole trader bank accounts. And that's where you get into a lot of problems when you come to do end of year taxes or reconciliation against things. So make sure that you've always got your bank account set up. So I personally, have got it set up as 3 bank accounts. So I've got one where all the money comes in. So that's the only account number that I ever put on an invoice. So that's for money coming in. I've then got one for outgoing. So as soon as money comes in, I transfer it to the outgoings. So I've also got that bank account set up so it hasn't got an associated bank card for the incoming. Then the outgoings is where I spend all the money. And then I've got one for savings and tax. So therefore I can allocate money over to the tax as I go, so that when I get a tax bill, I'm not surprised because I've already portioned that money off. So having those 3 bank accounts set up, incoming, outgoing, savings and tax, makes it nice and easy. Next, the next box on the canvas is all about your working style. Where are you going to work from? Home, co-working space, cafes, or are you actually going to be on site with the main client if you've only got one client? The other thing to think about with your freelancing is it full part-time, or is it a side hustle and you're only doing it to supplement your income, or is it you're only doing it as a side hustle until it gets big enough so that you can quit your day-to-day job? And then the other thing is, do you actually plan on collaborating with other freelancers? So I've got a couple of other freelancers that I work with closely. We're in slightly different disciplines, but we know that if we can ever work together, we always take up that opportunity because it's nice and easy. Next, thinking about your obligations. So depending on different where you are, you've obviously got tax obligations. Imagine if you're a freelancer for Uber or for Lyft, you know that you need to have a car to do that. So therefore you need to have a car license, but a driver's license. But is there any other licenses that you need to do for your freelance operation? Or is there any accreditation that you need to be a freelancer in your field? The next is insurance. Do you need public liability or professional indemnity insurance for what you're doing? Or are you covered by the client's insurance? That's one thing that you've got to make sure that you've got set up early, because especially with large corporates and government departments, if you don't have the right insurance, then you'll lose out on work. Cool. The next box, kit. Thinking about what you need to do your job. Do you need any specific hardware or software that you haven't got because you've been working as a full-time before you started your freelancing, so therefore your employer paid for it previously? Or is there any safety gear? Are you a freelance window cleaner and you need specialized safety abseiling gear for cleaning windows? Or do you need your own transport for your jobs to get to and from client sites? The one thing that I found when I started out, and one thing that I make sure that I've got with all my statement of works and contracts, is that if there's any specific software that's needed to perform the task, then it's the obligation of the client to provide it. So for instance, I'm a UX designer, so I've got Figma, Sketch, the Adobe suite. But last year I started working with a client and they wanted to use Abstract as their content management, as their document management system for their design files. And so I didn't have a license for that. So therefore, as they had signed the statement of work to provide all the software, they provided it. So that's one thing to think about as well, is that you might not necessarily need to buy all the software under the sun, because quite often clients will have licenses that they can share with you for the duration of a project. The other thing to think about is, do you need to buy it all straight away? So when I started out, I had a slimmed down version of the Adobe suite. And then as and when I needed it, I expanded the use for the Adobe suite. And as I said, can the client pay for it? Next, this is probably one of the most important things, is actually thinking about your goals and your values. This is often thought within the freelancing area as not needed because you're not a big business, so I don't need to have a mission statement. But especially if you're just starting out and you're starting out as a side hustle and you want to grow it. Or for instance, when I started growing mine, I've expanded my company several times in order to build some products out. And so that was one of my goals, was to actually expand. So therefore, if you're expanding, you may have different goals than if you're just doing it as a regular thing. But also, the goals and values help you identify what type of clients you want to work with, what vertical sectors you want to deal with, especially which ones you don't want to deal with. The next section of the canvas is around your portfolio. So how are you going to show prospective clients what you're good at, your past work? One of the key things here is that you might not have permission to show certain things. So for instance, one of my clients that I've worked with is Weta Digital, and I did work for Avatar 2, but I can't share any of the stuff that James Cameron's got. I can't share the photos that I was able to take on site doing user testing at the studios in LA. So, but I know that I can't show that. I'm allowed to show it as a printout in a meeting, like as an interview, to say, here's what I designed for James Cameron to use on set on his iPad, but I can't publish it online. So there's things you've got to make sure that with old clients that you've got permission to show it. Also, where are you going to show it? Are you going to host it on a site? So for like my profession, there's a lot of people with Dribble accounts. There's a lot of people with Behance, and obviously you may need your own website. But if you're a freelance window cleaner, you might not need your own website because you might get a lot of stuff from word of mouth. The other important thing is testimonials. Do you have any testimonials from your clients, or either from your old employers? You may be able to use those on your portfolio. Okay, this is the one that I like, lift pitch. How can you describe yourself in 20 seconds? So imagine you've got on the bottom of a lift. It's a high skyscraper, so the lift goes for 20 seconds. Someone asks you what you do. You've got 20 seconds to pitch what you want to pitch you, your profession, your freelance operation. And it's really good to get that down nailed, so that in those situations where you're at a networking event, you're in a lift, or you're just generally bump into someone who's a friend of a friend, but they may end up being a client down the line. It's always good to understand and design your pitch for 20 seconds or less. So that covers the left half of the canvas, which is all around how you're working, how you want to position yourself, what you need day to day. The right-hand side of the canvas goes into more detail about how you're going to do the work. So the first part of this is services and rates. So what services will you offer? So me, because I've got a lot of other freelancers that I work with, if you looked at the Siso website, it's positioned not just as UX design, but also as development, strategy, training, consultancy. There's a lot of depth to my site, so it makes it look as if it's not just me, my wife who contracts through me, and one junior that I've got working for me at the moment. It looks as if it's a full team. But you may want to focus it down to a limited number of services. And also, when you're thinking about those services, you need to think about how you want to charge for them. Do you want to have fixed rate? So for instance, I've got, if I do a UX audit or an expert review, I've got a fixed price for that. So I can say that. I've got some training that I deliver on how to facilitate a workshop, problem solving, and various other aspects of UX and business analysis. And so that's a fixed price. Doesn't matter, you can have up to 12 people attend, it's the same price. But then I've got my UX design, my UX research, which I charge out at an hourly rate. The other thing to think about is, do you have different rates or do you have the same rate? So I myself, I've got two rates. I've got my one that I charge to corporates, and then I've got one that's about 10% less, and that's what I charge to startups that I help, or that's what I charge to if I get any work through a recruitment company, because I know they'll be clipping the ticket. And so in order to stay competitive, I use that. So two rates, one for corporates or direct clients, and one for startups and recruitment companies. And that's the other thing as well, is with your thinking back to your obligations with your tax. Here in New Zealand, if you go through a recruitment company, they're supposed to collect tax on your behalf, except if you've got an exemption certificate. So I don't know if that's the case in other countries, but that's one thing that you want to make sure that you look into, that if you go through certain means, that you've got the right exemptions for any tax or any, to make sure your payments go through clear. The next box is all around potential clients. Thinking about who, if you're starting out, who your first 5 potential clients are. The name of the person and how you're going to get in contact with them, and what's going to be your approach with them. So is it, okay, Steve from my old job, I'll phone him, say, let's go for a coffee. And then when you go for a coffee, that's when you'll pitch your services to him. Or is it a large corporate and you're focus on the person that's the head of a department, and you'll go, can I come in, have an hour and just present to you what our offerings are, and do it more formal. So it's always good. I quite often come back to this and go through and actually revisit, okay, who are the next 5 that I'll target, or who are the next 5 that have come to me and that I've been too busy, and now that my capacity is coming down, that I can actually now go and approach instead. So it's always good to keep a thought about who you want to speak to next. The next section is all around social media. So think about what social media channels you want, what works best in the profession you're in, or what works best with the clients that you're targeting. So like I got a role working for a company that's doing work for the American government through a Facebook group. And it was just purely, they just needed someone in New Zealand, because one part out of the 5 was being built by a university in New Zealand, although that was the focus for the following year. But if I wasn't in that Facebook group, I would never have known about it. It's also thinking about your Slack channels. So there's multiple Slack channels around for either finding freelancers to work with. So that's how I knew about this, through Venture, which is Alina's also in. But then there's also Slack channels that are particular to your profession. So I get quite a few around UX Wellington or CX New Zealand, where they're looking for people to support. So a lot of short-term gigs there. It's also thinking about what you're going to do with your social media channels. So with all good intention, I've got an Instagram, and I can safely say that the CISO Instagram probably hasn't posted since I had a junior designer do some work for me back in 2017. I mainly use Twitter for my announcements, and also LinkedIn. So think about what you want to do with your channels and how you're going to use them to your best advantage to get more clients and get the right work. The other part of that is also job platforms. So there's a lot of different job platforms out there. So there's the global ones like Fiverr, Upwork, TopTal, and all of those. But you may also have local ones. So like, for instance, here in New Zealand and also in Canada, you've got Unicorn Factory, which is a great one for connecting, and people can look for freelancers there, and freelancers can either apply for jobs or you can make direct contact with people. But then there's also professional ones. So for instance, Dribble, for designers, they've got one that's very specialized for that. So it's thinking about what you can do and where you can target and where you can find information. So this is really like the two-way. The job platform is the two-way, whereas your social media channels are often one way initially, or very specific networking opportunities. So that's basically the Freelance Canvas. There is everything I've spoken about today, I've put in a guide. So it's there and it's available for you to read as a guide and goes through all of the different sections. There's also the PDF of the actual canvas, so that you can go through and you can go through at your own time, go through all of the notes, and it'll help. And it's there to help you shape your freelancing operation to be a success.